Here's what I'm watching this month in Amador County. Inventory is shifting, buyer activity is cooling, and some sellers are making unexpected pricing moves. So what does that actually mean for you? Let's walk through the numbers and make some sense of it all, starting with where the market stands overall. Okay, so before we dive into the numbers, let me share something that might look a little bit different if you followed my market updates in the past, because up until now, I've been reporting on Amador County as a whole. But here's the problem, that kind of broad overview doesn't tell the full story anymore. The truth is, our local market just isn't one market. It's a collection of many micro markets, and each one is behaving just a little bit differently. So starting this month, I'm zooming in and getting laser focused. I'm updating these videos to reflect what's actually happening in places where I'm working every day, where my clients are actively buying, selling, and relocating right now. That includes places like Ione and Lake Camanche, Jackson, Sutter Creek, and Plymouth. And because so many of my buyers are looking across county lines, especially when upsizing, downsizing, or relocating, I'm also keeping a close eye on Folsom and Dorado Hills, Rancho Murieta, Rancho Cordova, Galt, Herald, and Wilton. This way you're not just hearing random stats, you're seeing what's happening in the exact areas that matter to you. Now, I'm still gonna give you a quick update on Amador County overall, not because it tells a whole story, but because it sets the stage for what's happening countywide before we zoom into the specific neighborhoods. So as of March of 2025, Amador County is sitting at 5.2 months of inventory. That still keeps things pretty neutral, but just barely. And as you'll see in a moment, that balance means very different things depending on the area. Plymouth, for example, is sitting at 16 months of inventory, while Jackson is just over 3. Same county, completely different vibes. That's exactly why we're zooming in, because behind that big picture number are very different stories playing out. Some with momentum, some with hesitation, and all of them worth watching. All right, let's kick things off in Ione in the Lake Camanche area. Not just because I live here, but because it's a great barometer for buyer activity lately. Right now, we're sitting at about 4.6 months of inventory. That puts us in a neutral market, and it's that sweet spot between the buyer's market and the seller's market. There were 32 homes for sale and 11 went pending, which is a massive jump from just 2 pending sales we had last month. That tells me buyers are out there, they're just being a little bit more selective. Now, the median list price was around $562,000, while the median close price, what homes actually sold for, dipped slightly to $475,000. Now, that might seem like a big gap, but sellers were still getting about 98% of their asking price. That's a strong recovery from last month when that number dropped to 87%, meaning sellers were coming down by a whopping 13% from their original list price. Homes here are taking about 36 days to sell on average, which is just a little slower than the 30-day average we saw last month, but quicker than the 46-day average we saw this time last year. And if you're not totally sure what some of these stats mean, like months of inventory, list to close price ratios, days on market, or why I use median prices over averages, I've got you covered. I'm putting together a quick explainer video to break it all down in plain English. No jargon, no spreadsheets, but for now, just know that this area is picking up and sellers are still getting solid offers. All right, next up is Jackson, where things are looking a little tighter than you might expect. Inventory is sitting at 3.1 months, which technically still puts us in a neutral market, but just barely. We're skimming the edge of a seller's market here, and that kind of balance tends to shift how both buyers and sellers approach the table. There were 28 homes for sale, 13 went pending, and 9 closed. The median list price was $551,000 and the median close price came in at $440,000, which is actually a 10% dip from the $490,000 this time last month. So these numbers are definitely something to watch. But even with that gap, sellers were still getting 101% of their original list price. That's up from 97% this time last month and way up from 91% this time last year, which tells me that buyers are still stepping up when the home checks all the right boxes. Homes here are taking about 42 days to sell on average, slower than Ione's 36-day pace, but a big improvement from the 79-day average this time last year. So while the pace feels a little slower, the offers are still strong and sellers who are priced right still have the upper hand. Next up is Sutter Creek, charming, historic, and usually pretty steady, but this month, not so much. We saw only 2 closed sales in March, down from 6 last month and just 4 this time last year. That's not a ton of data to work with, so any shifts in pricing or buyer behavior are going to look more dramatic than they might actually be. With that said, inventory jumped to 9.5 months, which is very well into a buyer's market territory. That's a big spike from just 3 months of inventory last month. So something definitely shifted. The median list price dipped slightly to about $655,000, but the median close price climbed to $570,000, which is actually higher than both last month and last year. So what gives? Well, homes here sat on the market for an average of 125 days. That's over 4 months. And sellers were only getting about 89% of their original list price, down from 93% last month and 96% a year ago. Bottom line, there's still demand in Sutter Creek, but buyers are taking their time and negotiating more. If you're selling here, pricing strategy and condition are going to matter more than ever. Now let's take a look at Plymouth, one of the most rural areas we're covering. Nestled in Amador's wine country, it's a quiet, scenic, and tends to attract buyers looking for land, privacy views, or even vineyard potential. This month, only 1 home sold, which isn't unusual for Plymouth, but what's interesting is that it closed in just 13 days and at full price, about $1.24 million. Now sure, this is just one sale and we're not drawing any big conclusions from it, but it does show that the right property at the right price can still move quickly in a slower submarket. Inventory is sitting at about 16 months, which sounds extreme, but remember, in an area with this little turnover, even 1 or 2 sales can shift that number dramatically. So if you own in Plymouth, just know that timing and pricing strategy matter more than ever. The listings that are moving, they're moving fast. Okay, before I wrap up, I also want to touch on a few nearby areas I'm actively tracking, especially for clients who are exploring beyond Amador County. So as I already mentioned, those places include Folsom, El Dorado Hills, Rancho Murieta, Rancho Cordova, Galt, Herald, and Wilton. But I'm not going to go into all the details here, otherwise we'd be here all day. But here are a few quick stats worth noting. Rancho Murieta had 10 homes go pending and 6 sold, with an average days on market of 86. Galt, Herald, and Wilton are currently sitting at just 1.5 months of inventory, the lowest across all the areas I'm tracking. And then Rancho Cordova's median close price hit $667,000. That's up 6.9% year over year and also up 7.8% from last month, showing a steady price growth in the current market. So if you live or are looking in any of these areas and want the full numbers, just reach out. I'm happy to pull a custom update for your neighborhood or even your specific property. Because while this monthly video gives you a solid information and overview, your situation deserves a deeper look, and I'd love to help you when you're ready. Okay, let's take a moment to discuss mortgage rates and what's influencing the current market dynamics. As of March of 2025, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate stands at about 6.72% according to Freddie Mac. So you might be wondering, why aren't rates dropping any more significantly, especially since the Federal Reserve was starting to do rate cuts in the fall? Well, mortgage rates are not influenced by just the Feds. They're influenced by the combination of factors including inflation expectations, investor confidence, and global economic conditions. Not just those Fed decisions. So speaking of global economics, recent developments like President Trump's new tariffs have introduced additional complexity. These tariffs have led to increased market volatility because a lot of people don't really understand how it's all going to work long term, and concerns about inflation, which in turn all impact mortgage rates. So if you're interested to take a deeper dive into how these elements interact and impact mortgage rates, stay tuned for my upcoming video, Market Stats 101, where in it we'll break down these concepts in plain English, making it easier to understand the real estate market's intricacies, especially how it ties into the tariffs and all of those things long term. All right, friends, that wraps up what I'm seeing across Amador County and the surrounding areas this month, but keep in mind this is just a snapshot in time. The market is always moving, kind of like an airport. Some homes are landing, some are getting ready to take off, and some are kind of stuck circling the runway, wondering what's next. So if you're kind of feeling that way too, whether you're curious about your home's value, thinking about making a move, or just trying to time things right, don't play the guessing game. Reach out and let's map out your best next step together. You can book a free market evaluation for your home or schedule a quick strategy session call using the links below, or head to my website, stacyriter.net/contact, and there's other ways to get in touch with me there. And if you've ever wished someone would just explain all these market lingo into plain English, keep an eye out for that Market Stats 101 video. It's coming soon, and you definitely won't need a degree in economics to feel like you finally get this stuff. Thanks for hanging out with me this month, and I'll see you in the next update.